Sellyer was killed instantly by a drunk driver. I'd first like to start telling you about my family and my husband. Dick and I had been married for 31 years that fall. He had been a research chemist working for Morton Chemical Roman Haas for 31 of those years. He was 60 years old at the time, and he had just retired in January of 2005. After he retired, he decided he wanted to become a realtor, and he did become a realtor with Caldwell Banker Primus and Elgin. He graduated in May of 2005 that year, and he had just sold his first home and was really enjoying his new profession. Dick and I have 3 children, Andrew, Laura, and David, 2 daughter-in-laws, Lauren and Casey. Dick was a very loving husband and father. His family meant everything to him. He was so proud of his children and all their activities and accomplishments. After so many years of having a busy home that fall, Dick and I were adjusting to being empty nesters. We were planning on doing more traveling and just enjoying time with our family and friends. We were also going to visit our children in college more often. At that time, all 3 of our children were attending Western Illinois University. Andy was a senior, Laura a sophomore, and David a freshman. Then on October 25th, 2005, at 11:12 a.m., our lives, as we knew them, stopped and then were changed forever. A drunk driver, through her selfishness, chose to drink and drive and caused a horrific car crash that day that altered many people's lives. That October 25th was a beautiful fall day, bright and sunny. And at 8:30 that morning, I was getting ready to go to work as I was a teacher's assistant at Dundee Middle School in West Dundee. Dick was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, and he said he was going to an open house in Marengo later that morning to have lunch and take a tour of the house with other realtors. We discussed the normal things like what we were going to have for dinner that night, what we were going to do after supper. And I kissed him goodbye and told him I'd see him later. That was the last time I saw my husband alive. Later that morning, Dick did leave with another realtor for the open house out in Marengo. He was driving on Route 20 on his way to Marengo, and if any of you are familiar with Route 20, the car crash happened right by the white church just before Harmony Road. There's a lot of construction going on there today, but their blue and white State of Illinois roadside memorial sign is still up at the crash site. At 12:05 that afternoon, my school principal came to get me out of class and told me there had been a horrible crash involving Dick, and I needed to get to the hospital right away. The assistant principal took me to the hospital. On the way there, I remember praying, "Please let Dick be alive. I could handle him being injured no matter how badly, but I needed him here." When I arrived at St. Joe's in Elgin, the ER doctor told me Dick had died at the scene. The Fight for Life helicopter had been called for him, but there was nothing they could have done to save him, so they turned it back. The pain and shock I felt were and are indescribable. Seeing my husband lying on the cart in the ER room, bruised, bleeding, and broken, surrounded by medical personnel and police officers, is one of the images I will never forget. I will also always remember holding his hand, which was still warm when I got to the hospital, and sitting by his side, waiting for our children and family to arrive. Thankfully, to get our children home from college quickly, a friend had arranged for a private plane to pick them up at Western and get them to the hospital that afternoon. The kids were just told that there was a horrible crash and they needed to get home immediately, and that a plane was waiting for them. Upon their arrival at the hospital, I had to tell them their dad had been killed. The kids saw their dad in the morgue that afternoon. In the first mind-numbing hours and days after the crash, our world was turned upside down. Newspaper reporters calling, McHenry County Sheriff's officers calling and giving us more information on the crash, organ donation calls, calls from the coroner as an autopsy husband's funeral, which, like many my age, we had hoped that it would not be for quite a few more years. But the hardest part, walking back into that house that afternoon, where only 8 hours before Dick sat alive and breathing and well, and now he was gone forever. Dick suffered severe injuries. All the ribs on his left side were broken. One rib had pierced his heart, and his aorta was torn, and he had facial fractures. His injuries were all due to the horrific impact of the crash, as our car was hit head-on by the drunk driver. Our car was pushed back 6 feet from the impact, and the front of our car was gone up to the firewall. The drunk driver's car rolled on its side. Thankfully, the realtor with Dick only suffered minor injuries as he took the brunt of the crash on his side. The drunk driver had only minor injuries and was treated and released from the hospital that afternoon. The drunk driver's name is Linda Mead. She was 49 at the time of the crash and had a blood alcohol level of .289 3 hours after the crash, which, as you know, is over 3 times the legal limit. At the time of the crash, police have estimated that her blood alcohol level was probably closer to .3 or higher, and that was at 11 a.m. in the morning. According to the police report, Linda Mead crossed the center line and hit our car head-on. Before she had hit Dick, it was reported that she had hit the roadside sign further back down the road and continued driving. The reason she gave her drinking drive that morning is she needed to go to the grocery store and get a gallon of milk. Linda Mead had 3 prior DUI convictions. She had lost her license for almost 14 years after the 3rd conviction and had gotten her license back in 1999. For the next 11 months, we were at the McHenry County Courthouse in an attempt to get justice for Dick. Every time we saw Linda Mead there, we felt angry at her for what she had done to Dick and our family. Seeing her in court with her family was a constant reminder that no matter what sentence she would get, she would eventually be able to return to her family. Dick was never coming back to us. Linda Mead did plead guilty and was sentenced to prison. Her actions ripped Dick from our lives that October morning. We never got to say goodbye and tell him how much we loved him or hold him as he died. Now, what has this crash done to our lives since? Since the pain of Dick's absence is and always will be felt by all his family and friends, there have been many major life events that have happened since Dick was killed. Our oldest son, Andy, married Lauren January of 2006, 3 months after Dick died. Our family was so looking forward to being together and sharing this joyous occasion. Walking down the aisle without Dick was very lonely and sad. In May of 2006, Andy and Lauren did graduate from Western. Then in May of 2013, Andy and Lauren gave us our first grandchild, a boy named Ryan, who is now 6 years old. His grandpa Dick would have been so proud of him and happy to have a grandson. Andy and Lauren also have had a second child since then, Charlotte, and she will be 2 soon. Our daughter Laura graduated in December of 2009 and is now a special education teacher in Addison. Dick was so proud of his daughter, and Laura misses her dad's love and guidance and is very sad at the thought that if she marries, he will not be here to walk her down the aisle. Our youngest son David graduated in May of 2009. He's had a very hard time dealing with his dad's death, still doesn't talk about it much. The crash and his dad's death influenced David's career choice. He changed his college major from education to criminal justice. He is now a DuPage County Deputy Sheriff. David and Casey married in July of 2013. Again, a happy day. Had sadness with it because Dick wasn't there to see his youngest son married. Dick and Casey have 2 children also, Finley, who is 4, and Poppy, who will be 2 also. It breaks my heart that Dick will never get to hold and play with his grandchildren, and they will never know what a wonderful grandfather they had. as all these life events have happened, there's always a sad feeling for all of us missing Dick. As you can see, Linda Mead's actions still affect us. Dick should have been here with us, and through no fault of his own, he was killed in a crash that Linda Mead could have prevented. It isn't the small day-to-day things that we miss Dick so much. We miss his hugs, his jokes, his support and guidance, his love, and most of all, his presence. The kids all miss his daily phone calls just to see how they were doing. I miss my friend, my partner, my husband. I miss Dick's strength in tough situations because he always knew how to handle everything. We were left to figure out how to go on without Dick, to support myself and take care of the multitude of things that go into caring for a family. We all still struggle at times to create a new normal for us with a major part of our family circle missing. Dick's birthday was in early March. He would have been 74 this year. May 4th would have been our 45th wedding anniversary. And this December will be our 14th Christmas without him. These special days and holidays have not gotten any easier to face. Our family is incomplete, and we miss Dick so much. It has been 14 years since Dick was killed. The pain for our family goes on and will continue to ripple through our lives with every decision I make alone. Any future weddings, holidays, grandchildren, and just everyday living. And just as a side note, this Christmas time is always very hard for me. It's hard to see the couples shopping together and enjoying the holidays. It's just not fair. Linda Mead's actions changed everything and will forever affect our lives. This doesn't end now that she has served her sentence. I'm not here to tell you not to drink, as Jessica said. That is your choice. I am here to tell you don't drink and drive. You have options, as you all know. Call a cab, Uber, Lyft, have a friend drive you home. Stay where you're at. Have a designated driver plan before you even go out. Tonight I'm speaking for my husband, Richard Sellyer. Since Linda Mead robbed him of his chance to tell his side of the crash, hopefully you will remember some part of our story and you won't ever drink and drive again. Linda Mead's choices took my husband's life. What will yours do?